faithfully delivering value and exploring the world's best books. Hi, this is Sally's Book Talk. I'm today's host, Jang Fan. We'll continue interpreting a short history of nearly everything for you. In the last episode, we ventured into the vast universe and deep atomic world. Human intellect has journeyed so far. But now, suddenly, looking back at our feet, we realize we know so little. We actually understand the sun's interior better than Earth's. So let's return to Earth and sort out the questions around us. We'll talk about the Earth beneath us and life on it. This section answers three questions. First, what's the current state of Earth? Second, how did life evolve? Third, where did humans come from and where are we headed? First, let's get familiar with the Earth under our feet. We'll start with its structure. In the 1930s, while studying earthquakes, people noticed seismic waves reflecting at tens of kilometers deep, clearly an interface where mass and elasticity change. Named the Moho discontinuity after the Croatian seismologist who discovered it, it separates the crust and mantle. Below, it's mostly peridotite rock down to 150 kilometers, but beyond that, it's unclear. At nearly half the distance to the core, the material changes again. This is the outer core, a layer of liquid ferromagnetic material. Inside that is the solid inner core, mainly iron and nickel. Think of it as a scorching hot iron ball. That's basically Earth's layered structure. We've covered what's underground, but how did the continents and oceans on the surface form? This brings us to the theory of continental drift. Back in the early 20th century, German meteorologist Alfred Wegener proposed it. He accidentally noticed the Atlantic coastlines fit together perfectly. Could Africa and South America have been joined, then split and drifted apart to form today's separated state? Basically, no one believed it because nobody knew what Earth's interior was really like. Until 1964, there were just too many signs showing that Earth's surface and solid interior couldn't be static. It had to be moving. The main evidence was discovering mountains and fissures on the ocean floor. A U-shaped mountain range stretches 75,000 kilometers from the North Atlantic, around Africa, through the Indian Ocean to the North Pacific. There's also a 19,000 kilometer long crack in the Atlantic seabed, up to 20 kilometers wide. Compared to continental rocks billions of years old, undersea mountains are less than 200 million years old. What does that mean? It clearly shows the ocean floor is constantly spewing out or spitting out large sections of crust. That's when people finally accepted that the Earth's crust moves. By 1968, people coined a more accurate term. It's plates drifting, not just continents, plates. Why do they drift? First, the driving force comes from the uneven mantle. Such heavy plates inevitably slide down. But isn't the mantle rock? Couldn't it support the plate's weight? Here's the explanation. Any material, however hard, if not a true crystal, behaves like viscous substances, as asphalt or honey, having fluidity but flowing incredibly slowly. Ancient European church windows are thicker at the bottom now. Over geological timescales, the crust drifts on this asphalt under gravity, not slides. There are problems does such a restless planet face. Morphologically, the crust isn't uniform. Mountainous areas extend 60 to 90 kilometers deep, while oceanic crust is only about 10 kilometers thick. This reveals plates are thick in the center but thin at the edges. When plates collide, earthquakes occur, like at Japan's Eurasian-Pacific Plate Junction. Beyond quakes, deadlier volcanoes form as flowing rock beneath the crust heats from the core. Temperatures there reach 4,000 to 7,000 degrees Celsius in the upper mantle. Weak spots get hot enough to melt rock into magma, which erupts as volcanoes. If trapped magma meets groundwater, it creates hot springs or steam vents. Next time you're in a hot spring, know you're sitting on a volcano that just couldn't erupt. Volcanic eruptions are periodic but unpredictable. Yellowstone Park in the Midwestern U.S. sits atop a massive magma chamber. If it erupts, no one could survive within 1,000 kilometers. Volcanic ash might take years to settle, blocking sunlight and causing global catastrophe. With regular volcanoes, you can usually find the crater. When surveyed in the 1960s, scientists couldn't find any crater at Yellowstone. Later satellite photos revealed, holy cow, the entire 9,000 square kilometer park is one giant caldera. Can volcanoes be predicted? Geologist Bob Doe from Yellowstone explains yes. Earthquakes, ground uplift, abnormal geysers, and fumaroles are all warning signs. Problem is, all these are happening now, and it's been 630,000 years since the last eruption, right on schedule. Yet tourists don't worry, we're sitting on a powder cake. But asteroids pose even greater risks than volcanoes. About 100 million asteroids cross Earth's orbit, 2,000 large enough to wipe out humanity. 65 million years ago, a 2.5-kilometer rock hit present-day Iowa, blasting dust with cosmic metals that settled globally, even Antarctica. Most scholars now link this to dinosaur extinction. Earth's magnetic field seems restless too, weakened 6% last century. This field arcs overhead, deflecting charged particles from destroying our atmosphere. The ozone layer above is crucial for UV protection. Magnetic poles flip every 500,000 years, on average. During transitions, weakened fields lose protection, creating huge vulnerability. The more we learn about Earth, the more miraculous human survival seems. Just look at neighboring planets. Our existence as living beings, especially humans, feels utterly fortuitous. Why did Earth become humanity's home? A short history of nearly everything distills these improbable reasons. First, we're at just the right distance from the sun. Too close and water would vaporize. Too far and it'd freeze solid. Second, our planet itself is perfectly suited, thanks precisely to those dangerous crust movements we mentioned. Volcanoes actually help tremendously. Volcanoes released gases from Earth's interior to form the early atmosphere. Plate collisions created uneven terrain. Otherwise, the whole planet would be underwater. Plus, if Earth were smaller, it couldn't retain an atmosphere. The air would escape. Third, we lucked out with a large moon that stabilizes Earth's rotation, preventing major wobbles. Don't underestimate axial tilt. Just a degree or two more would make climate swings unbearable. Fourth is timing. Had we emerged before dinosaurs went extinct, we'd likely have been stuck at mouse size under their dominance. But maybe this is all hindsight bias. Earth's miraculous suitability for us. Perhaps it's because we are Earthlings. It's the same thing. If Earth were different, we might have adapted differently anyway. Aliens might be shocked we survive oxygen-rich environments. Our food's calcium or iron could kill them. We're an established fact on Earth. Instead of debating how we're possible, let's explore how it happened. First, early Earth's environment. Terrible air, almost no oxygen, just volcanic acids, nitrogen, and CO2. Sunlight couldn't reach the surface. Water was abundant then as now. The young planet was flat, uniformly water-covered. So how did life emerge and evolve in this chaos? That's the second question for the next episode. First, how did life begin? Actually, it's still a mystery. In 1953, Chicago graduate Stanley Miller experimented with a sealed flask containing methane, ammonia, hydrogen sulfide, and water. After electric sparks, weeks later, it contained amino acids, fatty acids, sugars, and other organics, seemingly unlocking life's origins. But there are two issues. Miller's gas mixture was far more advanced than actual early atmosphere. Just nitrogen and CO2 couldn't create such nutrient-rich soup. More crucially, proteins are too complex. A typical protein has approximately 200 amino acids across 20 or more types. Randomly assembling functional proteins, the odds are astronomically impossible. And how did proteins even meet DNA during organic to biological transition? How did they negotiate cooperation? Yet, nature often shows spontaneous assembly. Even inorganic matter self-organizes. sometimes remarkably well. This suggests natural aggregation isn't purely random. Relying solely on physics can't explain it fully. If we accept nature has higher level strategies, life becomes comprehensible. Today's complexity evolved step by step. At each stage, changes weren't random. When stuck, solutions emerged intelligently. For example, water is essential, but monomer polymerization usually requires dehydration. Acid plus base leads to salt plus water, not the reverse. So water creates an energy barrier for assembly. Yet life first emerged in water, a major biological paradox. We still haven't decoded nature's strategy here. Anyway, life appeared regardless of how first life emerged 3.85 billion years ago. An early bacterium called cyanobacteria consumed water, kept hydrogen, released oxygen, inventing photosynthesis. For the next 2 billion years, it showed no urge to evolve. Oxygen was lethal to many life forms. Deadly poison, microbes hid in mud and guts avoiding light. But cyanobacteria survived, swimming in their own waste. Oxygen accumulated worldwide. 2 billion years later, bold cyanobacteria started capturing others. Captured bacteria became mitochondria, a functional symbiosis. Mitochondria harness abundant oxygen to produce energy. Oxygen fuels vitality. This principle holds even in microbes. Cyanobacteria gradually declined. Today, only one community survives on Australian stromatolites. Cyanobacteria are prokaryotes, lacking a proper nucleus. Newer species developed nuclei, eukaryotes. Grippania spiralis represents the oldest eukaryotes. Unlike cyanobacteria, they didn't persist long. Relatives like amoebas grew complex, single cells containing 400 million genetic instructions. After another billion years, eukaryotes leaped forward. First, they began harvesting energy from organics and photosynthesis. Second, sexual reproduction accelerated evolution. Cells combined into multicellular organisms like algae. Thus, they debuted. Unlike earlier cell engulfment, these cells maintained independence while cooperating, paving the way for specialized tissues and organs. Millions of years later, the Cambrian brought explosive speciation. Trilobites became early icons with legs, gills, antennae, and eyes. They even developed brain-like nervous systems. Dozens of trilobite species emerged, an unsolved evolutionary miracle. After billions of slow years, modern forms arose in just 10 million. Life exhibited vast morphological diversity and abundance. Canada's Burgess Shale revealed 140 species. This made many question if evolution follows steady, predetermined paths. Media commentators amplified the Cambrian explosion's drama. Re-examining fossils showed many weird species weren't so abnormal. Paleontologists made errors, mistaking spines for legs or fragments for whole animals, etc. Related species found in Greenland and China suggest earlier shared ancestors too small to fossilize well. If during the Cambrian period, climate or other reasons caused a massive size increase, it's not a big deal that it happened over a few million years. In short, the Cambrian explosion could still occur. It's just not so miraculous after all. The Cambrian period spanned 570 to 450 million years ago. Plants began crawling ashore, followed by animals, not fish, but small insects. Fierce sharks likely drove them ashore, and their shells helped retain moisture and support body weight. Back then, oxygen in the atmosphere reached 35%, so plants and animals grew wildly. Arthropods, these originally small insects, could grow over a meter long. Lycopods aren't related to pine trees. It's a reed-like plant that grows up to 40 meters. As for vertebrates connected to humans, which one is it? Well, how did they come ashore? Fossils are scarce. Still, we roughly see several waves of terrestrial animals rising and falling. Early primitive amphibians, later turtles and other reptiles, one of which evolved into primitive mammals. Then came dinosaurs. After their strange disappearance, mammals suddenly grew larger, diversified, and began dominating land. Prosperity inevitably leads to decline. Since life emerged, there have been five major extinctions and many minor ones. The Ordovician period, 440 million years ago, wiped out 80% of species. But afterward, fish and large aquatic reptiles flourished. The Devonian period, 365 million years ago, similarly eliminated 80% of species. Subsequently, plants and animals came ashore in masses. The Permian period wiped out 95% of species, and dinosaurs began to thrive. After that, the Triassic period eliminated another 70% of species. Dinosaurs survived and dominated the Jurassic period. Ultimately, dinosaurs didn't escape the Cretaceous extinction, which killed 70% of species, making way for mammals. This was 65 million years ago. Among mammals, one species saw its descendants diverge. One lineage led to humans, the other to mice, never intersecting again. From the planet's overall view, mass extinctions shouldn't be seen as complete tragedies. Disasters for earlier species often create opportunities for later ones. If dinosaurs hadn't gone extinct, humans couldn't have risen to the top of the food chain. Speaking of life's evolution, we must mention the founder of evolutionary theory. As a naturalist, Darwin may not have initially intended to create a theory, perhaps just expanding his collection for fame. In 1831, 22-year-old Charles Darwin hitched a ride on HMS Beagle, circumnavigating Atlantic, then South America, then Pacific, then Australia, then Indian Ocean, then Africa, then back to Atlantic, finally returning to England. Over 5 years, Darwin collected specimens and fossils for lifelong study. Biological evolution. This concept wasn't Darwin's creation. Darwin's true insight was constructing an evolutionary mechanism perfectly summarized as natural selection, survival of the fittest. On islands, seabirds show extreme wing variations, either huge or tiny. Fierce storms define these birds' environment. Without strong wings, they're better off sheltering in caves. Seabirds with medium-sized wings often get blown to sea. Such species likely don't survive. Darwin insisted evolution was always gradual. Saltationists argued species leap between states. Fossils lacking intermediate forms challenged Darwin's theory. We still can't dismiss these doubts. Let's treat evolution as a concept, not verified theory. Later, a key question was resolved. Darwin never explained how advantageous traits strengthen over generations. Logically, large winged seabirds mating with medium winged ones should produce averaged wings, diluting the trait over generations. Genetics pioneer Mendel's P experiments disproved this blending. Inheritable traits split into dominant or recessive pairs governed by factors. These factors pair within individuals. Right. These became known as genes. A reproductive cell combination involves splitting and repairing these units. These factors, whether dominant or recessive, are fully passed on to the next generation. So traits aren't blended. Which one gets kept or lost depends on luck. But with large-scale breeding, patterns emerge due to probability. Ever wondered how just a human face has so many subtle differences? If one gene controlled nose size alone, how many more would be needed for hooked or bulbous noses? With so many traits, if it were that simple, even 10 times more genes wouldn't be enough. Thankfully, a short history of nearly everything was written late enough when molecular biology had advanced sufficiently. That's how we can now provide an answer. The genetic code is hidden in the cell nucleus, recorded on DNA. DNA is like a twisted zipper, with teeth being base pairs encoding genetic info. A segment of certain length can express a complete meaning. For example, black or blonde hair. That's one gene. Genes are the basic units controlling traits. A gene fragment refers to a segment of this long spiral. But after understanding DNA's structure, something puzzling arises. Humans have only 35,000 to 100,000 genes, yet a simple weed has just as many. How do 100,000 genes produce such complex life features? Scientists answer that genes don't map one-to-one to human traits. In other words, hair color isn't determined by a single gene segment. Uh, Genes likely work together in a many-to-many mapping to external traits, allowing life to be infinitely complex. So how do genes collaborate? What kind of tacit understanding? It's probably unsolvable in the short term. The researchers have done experiments transplanting human DNA segments into fruit fly cells. The fruit flies accepted them as if they were their own genes. Similar experiments have been done many times, and we now know that 60% of human genes are identical to fruit flies. This implies that all living beings seem to share a blueprint. God was being lazy. The final chapter in life's story is about us. Where did humans come from, and where are we headed? Earlier in life's evolution, we discussed the fifth mass extinction in the Cretaceous period, after which humans and mice diverged from a common ancestor. Then, around 15 million years ago, the human branch split from apes, then from chimpanzees. About 7 million years ago, several hominin species appeared. Archaeologists found hominin fossils across Africa. Bones clearly show they all walked upright on two legs. Which one is humanity's ancestor? The earliest discovered was Australopithecus, a genus parallel to Homo. Genus refers to biological classification. Some thought it was our ancestor, but its thigh bones differ from humans, and no tools were found. It existed until about 2 million years ago. 2 million years ago, Africa hosted at least 6 hominin groups simultaneously, including Australopithecus and early Homo. Homo brains were 50% larger than Australopithecus. Pre-Homo history is sparse. Consensus suggests climate drying turned forests into savannas. Both Australopithecus and Proto-Homo descended from trees to ground life. This climate shift occurred when the Isthmus of Panama rose, connecting Americas and altering ocean currents, drying Africa. Now, over 1 million years ago, other hominin genera vanished in Africa. Only Homo survived. Homo erectus emerged first in Homo. By then, we'd use he or she, since they showed human traits. Evidence shows laundry, cooking, childcare, and their physique aligns with modern aesthetics. Another milestone, Homo erectus migrated from Africa, likely due to harsh climate, widely accepted. Subsequent events have some debate, but general consensus exists. That million-year-old migration spread worldwide, evolving into Java man in Asia, Peking man in China, Heidelberg man and Neanderthals in Europe. Unfortunately, these early migrants were eventually replaced. Homo erectus, remaining in Africa, evolved into Homo sapiens 100,000 years ago, triggering a second migration wave. This time they were unstoppable, occupying all lands, our sole certified ancestors who continued expanding 60,000 years ago. When the Bering Strait water levels dropped, they crossed from Northeast Asia to the Americas. That's why 7 billion humans today share astonishingly identical genes. All humanity likely descended from one African population numbering under 10,000. This remains our biological origin story as a species so far. Genetically, we seem hostile to diversity. 2 million years ago, we eliminated other hominin genera, or politely outcompeted them. 100,000 years ago, other Homo species, well, eliminated too. Author Bill Bryson worries. Were chosen to steward Earth's neighbors, yet unfortunately became nightmares for manatees and dodos. By the time humanity realized this, it was too late. Human-caused extinction rates are 100 times faster than Earth's natural average. Especially last century, species vanished, 2 million kinds. As humans, sharing this planet with life is lucky. Leading it is doubly fortunate. But we only get one chance, so let's cherish a short history of nearly everything. That concludes the book. Find notes below the audio. See you tomorrow.